I told you to stay off my property. You have no right to be here, and I want you arrested now.
Move your filthy cows, you disgusting redneck trash. The scream tore through the serene Texas morning like a jagged knife, shattering the peace of a sunrise that had been perfect only seconds before. I didn't even have time to turn my head before the deafening blast of a car horn joined the shrieking. It wasn't a friendly tap. It was a continuous, aggressive blare that sounded like the apocalypse was arriving in a luxury sedan. My heart hammered against my ribs, not from fear for myself, but from the sudden, chaotic explosion of panic among my herd. These weren't just random livestock. They were pregnant heifers heavy with calves, their instincts wired for flight at the slightest threat. And right now, a white BMW X5 was barreling down my private gravel road at 40 miles an hour, treating my ancestral land like a chaotic stretch of the Autobahn. Hey! Slow down. I roared, waving my arms frantically, dust choking my lungs. But she didn't slow down. Karen Bradshaw, the self-appointed queen of the Millbrook Estates HOA, simply accelerated. I saw her through the windshield. Oversized designer sunglasses, teeth bared in a snarl of entitlement, one hand leaning on the horn while the other clutched a Starbucks cup. She swerved violently to miss a mesquite bush, her tires spinning and spitting gravel like buckshot, the herd scattered in blind terror. That's when I saw it happen, a moment that seemed to unfold in slow motion. My prize heifer, Bessie, weeks away from birthing and worth upwards of $15,000, scrambled for footing on the loose stones. The BMW clipped her flank, not a direct hit, but close enough. The massive animal buckled, her legs splaying awkwardly as she crashed into the ditch with a sound of distress that made my stomach turn over. Karen didn't stop. She didn't check. She just rolled down her window as she sped past me, leaving a cloud of limestone dust that coated my skin and filled my mouth with a taste of grit and rage. This road is community property now, hillbilly. Get your beasts out of my way, she screeched, her voice trailing off as the BMW fishtailed around the bend toward the highway. I stood there in the settling dust, my hands trembling, not from fear, but from a cold, hard fury that I hadn't felt in years. I rushed to Bessie. She was trembling, eyes wide with panic, letting out low, pained bellows. I ran my hand along her flank, checking for brakes, soothing her with soft words that fell hollow against the violence of the last 60 seconds. She would survive, but the stress could cost the calf. It could cost me a fortune. But as I watched the red taillights of that white SUV vanish toward the city, I realized this wasn't about money anymore. My name is Jake Riverside. I'm not a violent man. I'm a man of the land. These 50 acres have been Riverside soil since 1940. My grandfather, Silas Riverside, cleared the mesquite and rattlesnakes with his bare hands and a mule named Jack. He built this ranch road in 1942, hauling one truckload of caliche at a time, sweating under the same relentless Texas sun that was now beating down on my neck. Every morning, I wake up to the sounds he heard, the lowing of cattle, the creak of the windmill, the smell of sweet hay mixed with that distinctive scent of dust and diesel that means home. This isn't just real estate. It's where I proposed to Sarah under the lightning-split oak tree. It's where we raised 2 kids who are now city folk down in Austin. It's where 3 generations of Riversides are buried on a hill overlooking Willow Creek. When I run my hand along the weathered fence posts, I can still feel the splinters my daddy got putting them up. The deed to this land is signed and witnessed from a time when a man's handshake was a binding contract, stronger than any lawyer's paper. But times have changed, and a change arrived 6 months ago in the form of the Millbrook Estates, a sprawling development of modern farmhouse McMansions that sprang up on the border of my property like a fungal infection. And with it came Karen Bradshaw. She rolled into town like she owned the whole county. A divorced real estate agent from Dallas with more money than sense and a chip on her shoulder the size of the Alamo. She bought the biggest house on the hill, listed for close to $1 million, and immediately set about improving the neighborhood. Within 6 months, she had maneuvered herself into the HOA President seat. Her reign of terror started innocently enough. She figured out that cutting through my private ranch road saved her exactly 3 minutes getting to the highway. For a woman who spent an hour every morning applying enough makeup to paint a barn, you'd think 3 minutes wouldn't matter. But for Karen, it wasn't about time. It was about dominance. First time through, I thought she was lost. I waved. She ignored me. Second time, I walked out to the gate, polite as Sunday church, and explained it was private property. She had powered down that window, the AC blasting cold air into the Texas heat, and flashed a smile so fake it could have been stamped made in China. "Oh, honey," she had purred, looking at me like I was something she'd scraped off her shoe. "This little dirt trail? That's been public access forever. You can't just block neighbors from using established community routes. It's unneighborly." I had showed her the deed. I pointed to the no trespassing signs. I explained that everything past the cattle guard belonged to the Riverside family and had since before she was born. Her smile turned sharp enough to cut glass. "Well, bless your heart, sugar. We'll just see about that." Any Texan knows "bless your heart" is fighting words wrapped in lace. It's a polite way of saying "go to hell." And that sugar dripped with enough venom to kill a horse. But today was a declaration of war. I knelt beside Bessie, checking her legs again. She was limping, favoring her left hind leg. The vet bill alone would be $500. The potential loss of the calf? Priceless in terms of bloodline. I stood up and looked toward the horizon where the cookie-cutter roofs of Millbrook Estates marred the skyline. Karen Bradshaw hadn't just insulted me. She hadn't just trespassed. She had endangered my livelihood and hurt an animal under my protection. She thought I was just some dumb, redneck trash who would roll over because she drove a German car and used big words. She thought her HOA title gave her jurisdiction over my grandfather's legacy. I took my hat off, wiped the sweat and dust from my forehead, and put it back on, pulling the brim low. No more warnings, I whispered to the empty road. That night, instead of sleeping, I sat on the porch with a glass of whiskey and a topographic map of the county. I wasn't just going to stop her. I was going to teach her a lesson that would echo through the hill country for generations. She wanted to play games with property lines? Fine. I was about to show her the difference between city rules and country justice. 3 days after Karen nearly killed my prize bull's offspring, she didn't apologize. She didn't offer to pay the vet bills. She brought out the big guns. I was out by the perimeter fence, replacing wire. $1. 500 worth of damage caused when the herd panicked and ran through the barbed wire to escape her horn-blasting assault. My hands were cut, my back was aching, and the Texas sun was hammering down like a blacksmith's mallet. That's when a cloud of dust signaled a vehicle approaching. It wasn't Karen's BMW this time. It was a nondescript sedan, the kind fleet managers buy because they're cheap and soulless. Out stepped a young man in a suit that cost less than my boots. He was sweating through his polyester shirt, clutching a thick envelope like a shield. "Jake Riverside?" he asked, looking nervously at the bull watching him from 10 yards away. "That's me," I said, not moving toward him. "You've been served." He practically threw the envelope onto the fence post and scrambled back to his car, as if he expected me to pull a shotgun. I wiped my hands on a rag and opened the packet. The header was embossed on thick, creamy bond paper that crackled with billable hours. Morrison, Patterson & Associates. Attorneys at law, Dallas. Karen had called in the cavalry. I sat on the tailgate of my truck and read through 3 pages of legal horseshit. It boiled down to this: cease and desist blocking established public easement immediately or face litigation for damages, emotional distress, and interference with community transit. They threw around fancy phrases like prescriptive easement and continuous public use for over 2 decades. The smell of fear and bullshit was overwhelming. Here's what those Dallas lawyers were counting on: that some small-town rancher would see the letterhead, panic at the big words, and roll over. They figured intimidation beats facts every time. Hell, in their world, it probably works 90% of the time. They thought I was simple. They thought I didn't know how to read a survey. Daddy always said, never bring a knife to a gunfight. But he never mentioned what to do when lawyers bring a bazooka to a property dispute. I didn't call them. I didn't yell. I drove straight to the Millbrook County Courthouse. The records room is in the basement, a place that smells like old leather, curing paper, and broken dreams. Betty Coleman has run this dungeon since dirt was invented. She knows where every skeleton in the county is buried, literal and metaphorical. Jake Riverside, Betty croaked, peering over her spectacles. Here you got trouble with the Duchess of Millbrook. News travels fast, Betty. Faster than that BMW of hers, she chuckled. What do you need? I need everything. The original 1940 deed, the 1987 survey correction my daddy filed, and I need the development plat for Millbrook Estates. I spent 6 hours in that basement. My eyes burned from the dim lighting, but what I found was worth more than gold. The lawyers were lying. Or, more likely, Karen had lied to them, and they hadn't bothered to check. Not only was my road clearly marked as private property on every map since World War II, but my father had specifically fought a county proposal to widen it in 1987. There was a judge's order signed in black ink declaring the road private access only, no public maintenance or easement. But the real smoking gun wasn't in my file. It was in hers. I pulled the development map from Millbrook Estates. I traced the property lines, and there, buried in the fine print of the covenants, conditions, and restrictions, CC and RS, filed by the developer, was Section 12, subsection D. The developer and subsequent homeowners association explicitly waive any claim to pre-existing agricultural access roads adjacent to the western boundary. My road. They had signed away their rights before they poured the first foundation. Karen wasn't just wrong. She was legally hallucinating. Found something good? Betty asked, watching me smile for the first time in days. Better than good, Betty. I found the ammunition. But while I was building my legal fortress, Karen was orchestrating her next symphony of destruction. I stopped by the post office on my way home. Eddie Martinez, our mail carrier and the unofficial head of the town gossip network, was leaning against his truck. Eddie knows who is pregnant before the husband does, and he knows which teenagers are sneaking beer behind the grain elevator. Jake, Eddie said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. You know that HOA princess of yours? Hard to forget her, Eddie. She's been running real estate showings. I saw her leading a caravan of cars yesterday. I heard her pitch when I was delivering certified mail to her place. My stomach tightened. What pitch? She's promising buyers something called exclusive ranch road access. Eddie adjusted his cap. I heard her tell a couple from Dallas that buying in phase 2 comes with private gated access through the historic Riverside Ranch. Said it gives them authentic Texas living without the cattle smell. She's telling them your road is their amenities package. The puzzle pieces clicked together like the bolt of my grandfather's Winchester. Karen wasn't stealing my road for convenience. She was selling it. She's got over $2 million in pending sales. Eddie continued. All of them are banking on that access. Without it, those folks have to drive 4 miles around the long way to get to the highway. So, Princess Karen had painted herself into a corner slicker than pig grease. She had promised buyers my property as a feature of her development. If she couldn't deliver, those sales would collapse faster than a politician's promises. She wasn't just entitled. She was financially desperate. She needed my road to close her deals. I drove home slowly, the anger simmering down into something colder, harder, something more dangerous. I walked into the kitchen where Sarah was grading papers. She looked up, seeing the look in my eye. She's been married to me for 25 years. She knows that look. You're planning something, she said quietly. She's selling our land, Sarah, literally marketing our road as her private amenity. Sarah put down her red pen. So what do we do? Sue her. Lawsuits take years. She'll have those houses sold and occupied by then, and we'll be fighting 50 homeowners instead of one. I walked to the window, looking out at the spot where the wall would eventually stand. We need something faster, something permanent. What are you gonna do, Jake? I turned back to her. My daddy always said, property lines are like marriage vows. They only work if you defend them. Jake, I'm gonna build a wall. Sarah, and I'm gonna make her watch her empire crumble against it. That night, the harassment escalated. Karen started treating my ranch road like her personal highway system. Morning commute, drove through. Lunch run, drove through. But now, she was bringing passengers. At 6:30 p.m., I watched on my security camera as the white BMW rolled slowly down my road. She stopped near the creek. I could see her pointing out my oak tree to the couple in the back seat. She was giving a guided tour of the property she was stealing. The disrespect was physical. It felt like a slap in the face. I picked up the phone and dialed Ray Molina. Ray has built everything in this county, from cattle chutes to tornado shelters. If it needs to survive Texas weather and Texas women, Ray is your man. Ray, I said when he picked up. You busy next week? For you, Jake? Never. What do you need? Barn repair? No. I need a fortress. The planning meeting for the wall felt less like a construction consultation and more like plotting a military coup. Ray Molina rolled up at 6 a.m. Friday morning in a Ford F-350 that seemed more hard work than a congressman's conscience. Ray is a third-generation Texas builder. He doesn't deal in drywall and aesthetic shiplap. He deals in steel, concrete, and permanence. So, You want to stop a pissed-off woman in a German luxury car? Ray asked, spitting a stream of tobacco juice at a fire anthill with sniper-like precision. Hell, Jake, that's harder than stopping a runaway locomotive. We walked the property line where my dusty ranch road met the manicured asphalt of Karen's precious development. Ray took measurements while I laid out the tactical situation. Here's your fortress, Ray said finally, sketching in the dirt with a mesquite stick. We don't build a fence, Jake. Fences are suggestions. We build a barrier. 12 feet high, steel-reinforced concrete, utility grade. Foundation 4 feet deep. We angle the top outward toward her side. Makes it impossible to climb. Even if she gets hold of a surplus Abrams tank. She ain't driving through this. The engineering was poetry in concrete. It was aggressive. It was overkill. It was exactly what I wanted. When can you start? Monday morning. I'll have the rebar cages prepped this weekend. But Jake, Ray tipped his hard hat back, looking me dead in the eye. Once we pour this, there's no going back. This is a declaration of war written in stone. The war started 6 months ago, Ray. This is just a winning move. While Ray mobilized his army of cement mixers, I went back to intelligence gathering. If I was going to crush Karen Bradshaw, I needed to know exactly how fragile her empire really was. I made a call to Maria Santos. Maria is the only real estate agent in 3 counties who won't sell ice to Eskimos because she thinks it's dishonest. She's rarer than hen's teeth in this business. Jake, I shouldn't be talking to you about another agent, Maria said, her voice tight with professional anxiety when she met me at the diner. I'm not asking for trade secrets, Maria. I'm asking if the rumors are true. Is she really leveraging my land? Maria sighed, pushing her coffee cup around. It's worse than that, Jake. Karen is drowning. The divorce left her with the big house and bigger debts. She hasn't moved a major property in 6 months. Those 3 pending sales in Millbrook Phase 2? They are her entire lifeline. If those contracts fall through, she's looking at foreclosure and bankruptcy within the quarter. The picture snapped into lethal focus. Karen wasn't just an entitled HOA president on a power trip. She was a cornered animal fighting for her financial survival. She had bet the farm, my farm, on those sales. She had personally guaranteed the buyer's amenities she didn't own. And the HOA? I asked. Broke, Maria whispered. She pushed through expensive landscaping projects, new entry gates, fountains, to boost curb appeal for her own listings. The HOA reserves are drained. If property values don't jump 15% this year to justify a special assessment, the other residents are going to revolt. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Then I remembered Bessie limping in the ditch. Karen had built a house of cards on a foundation of lies, and she was using my property as the glue to hold it together. Karen must have sensed the shifting winds. Perhaps she saw Ray's surveying stakes lined up like teeth along the property boundary. Her response was immediate escalation into psychological warfare. The horn honking changed. It wasn't just during her commute anymore. It became a weapon of terror. At 2 a.m. Saturday morning, I was jolted awake by the blare of that BMW horn, sustained for a solid 30 seconds right at my gate. By the time I got to the porch with my shotgun, taillights were disappearing around the bend. At 4:15 a.m., it happened again. She was trying to break me through sleep deprivation. She was trying to spook the cattle into stampeding through the fences again, costing me money and time I needed for construction. It was petty, it was malicious, and it was a massive tactical error. She was trying to make me angry. She should have been trying to make me scared. Anger just gives a Texan focus. Sunday morning, the day before construction was set to begin, I found the first physical evidence of her desperation. I rode out to the construction site at dawn to check the survey markers Ray had placed. They were gone. All of them. Pulled up and thrown into the brush. It was amateurish sabotage. Ray's crew didn't need the wooden stakes. The GPS coordinates were already locked into their equipment, but the intent was clear. I checked the game camera I had zip-tied high up in the oak tree overlooking the site, a little insurance policy I hadn't mentioned to anyone. I pulled the SD card and plugged it into my field laptop, right there on the tailgate of my truck. The footage from 3:33 a.m. showed a figure dressed entirely in black, expensive-looking designer athletic wear, not practical work clothes, stumbling through the dark. The figure wasn't carrying tools. They were carrying a golf club, a 9-iron by the look of it. The figure proceeded to beat the hell out of the wooden survey stakes in a fit of impotent rage, swinging the golf club like they were attacking a cobra. It was pathetic. It was hysterical. The infrared camera couldn't make out facial features clearly, but it caught something else. As the figure turned to leave, the moonlight caught the reflective logo on the back of their jacket. It was a logo for the Millbrook Estates HOA. I didn't call the sheriff. Not yet. This wasn't a crime spree. It was a tantrum. A tantrum thrown by someone who knew the walls were closing in. I saved the footage to 3 different secure cloud accounts. Then I called Ray. Change of plans for tomorrow morning. I said, "What's up? You getting cold feet?" "No. I want to make sure we have an audience. Can you delay the first cement pour until 7:30 a.m.? Ray chuckled, instantly understanding. You want to synchronize with Her Highness's morning commute. If she wants to use my road as her personal runway, I figure she ought to have a front row seat to its closing ceremony. I hung up and looked out over the land. The sun was rising, painting the sky in shades of fire and blood. Tomorrow, the concrete would flow. Tomorrow, Karen Bradshaw would learn that in Texas, when you try to steal a man's land, you don't get a strongly worded letter. You get buried under the consequences. The concrete mixer rumbled to life on Monday morning with a sound that felt like the earth itself was clearing its throat. It was 7:10 a.m. Ray Molina had timed it with the precision of a Swiss watchmaker. 3 trucks were lined up, engines idling, their drums spinning slowly, filled with enough wet cement to bury a pharaoh. I stood by the gate, coffee in hand, leaning against Ray's F-350. The air smelled of diesel exhaust, wet earth, and impending victory. "She's late," Ray noted, checking his watch. Usually sets her clock by that commute. "Give her a minute," I said, taking a sip of black coffee. She probably had to touch up her war paint. Right on cue, at 7:14 a.m., the familiar aggressive whine of the turbocharged BMW engine cut through the morning air. She was coming fast, likely trying to make up for lost time, expecting to blow through my property as usual. But today, there was no road. Ray had parked a massive front-end loader directly across the entrance, its bucket resting on the ground like a steel jaw. Behind it, the trench of foundation was already dug, 4 feet deep and 3 feet wide, a jagged scar across the earth that marked the end of an era. The BMW crested the hill, doing at least 40. I saw the nose of the car dip violently as she slammed on the brakes. The ABS pulsed, tires biting into gravel, sliding to a halt just inches from the loader's massive rear tire. Dust swirled around the pristine white paint. For a moment, there was silence. Then, the driver's door flew open. Karen Bradshaw emerged like a vengeful spirit. She was wearing a cream-colored pantsuit that probably cost more than my first truck, and her face was a mask of sheer, unadulterated disbelief. "What is this?" she screamed, marching toward us, her heels sinking into the soft dirt I'd churned up on purpose. "Move this equipment. I have a showing in Dallas at 8:30. "Morning, Karen," I said, not moving from my spot. "Can't go this way. Road's closed. Permanently." She stopped 10 feet away, her eyes darting between me, Ray, and the wall of machinery. "You can't close a community access route. This is illegal. I will have this equipment impounded, and you arrested for obstruction of traffic." Ray stepped forward, tipping his hard hat. He held out a clipboard. "Actually, ma'am, this here is a permitted construction site. Agricultural security barrier, Class A, authorized by Millbrook County under permit number 24-709. We're pouring the foundation for a livestock protection wall." Karen slapped the clipboard out of his hand. It hit the dirt with a dull thud. "I don't care about your redneck permits," she shrieked, her voice cracking. "My buyers are expecting access. The HOA has rights." "The HOA," I said, my voice low and hard, "signed away those rights in 1998. I read the CC and RS, Karen. Section 12, subsection D. You don't own this road. You never did. And as of this morning, you never will again." I pointed toward the county highway, the long way around. "You've got a showing at 8:30? Google Maps says the detour adds 15 minutes. If you leave now, you might only be 10 minutes late." She stood there, shaking. For the first time, I saw the cracks in the porcelain mask. She looked at the cement trucks, then at me. She realized physical intimidation wasn't going to move 50 tons of steel. "You'll regret this, Jake Riverside," she hissed, backing away toward her car. "You think a little concrete scares me? I have friends in the county. I have lawyers. By the time I'm done, you won't even own the dirt you're standing on." She got back in her car, slammed the door, and executed a furious 20-point turn, nearly backing into the ditch. As she peeled away toward the main highway, Ray picked up his clipboard and dusted it off. She seems nice, Ray deadpanned. All right, boys, buit. The chutes extended. The gray sludge began to flow. As the concrete filled the trench, hardening into the foundation of my fortress, I felt a weight lift off my chest. But Karen wasn't done. She was just changing tactics. The counterattack arrived on Thursday. The wall was half finished. The rebar skeleton was up, looking like the rib cage of a giant prehistoric beast. I was in the barn prepping feed when I saw a white van pull up to the main gate. It wasn't the sheriff. It wasn't a lawyer. It was the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, TCQ. A man with a badge and a clipboard got out, looking weary. Behind him, Karen's BMW pulled up, parking a safe distance away. She stayed inside, watching like a vulture. Mr. Riverside? The agent asked. I'm Inspector Miller. We received an emergency report regarding hazardous waste runoff and diseased livestock contaminating the local watershed. Let me guess, I said, nodding toward the BMW. An anonymous concerned neighbor? Miller sighed. We have to investigate every claim, sir. The report alleges you have a massive pile of untreated manure leaching into Willow Creek and cattle showing signs of, well, let's just say highly infectious pathogens. It was biological warfare. She was trying to get my operation shut down by the state. If she could prove my ranch was a health hazard, she could get a court order to halt construction and maybe even condemn the land. It was desperate, dirty, and dangerous. Come on in, Inspector, I said, opening the gate wide. Check whatever you want. For 3 hours, Miller inspected everything. He tested the water in the creek. He checked the manure management bunkers, which Ray had rebuilt 2 years ago to commercial standards. He walked through the herd. My cattle were healthier than most people in Millbrook. Their coats were shiny, eyes clear. The diseased heifer Karen had reported was actually Bessie, recovering from the limp Karen herself had caused. Miller put his equipment away. He walked over to where I was leaning on a fence post. Mr. Riverside, your water quality is actually higher than the county average, Miller said, closing his folder. And your herd is pristine. I know. Miller glanced at the BMW still parked down the road. Filing a false environmental report is a Class B misdemeanor in Texas, sir. Waste of state resources. This is the 3rd time this month that woman has called us on different properties. Is that so? She tried this on a developer in North Dallas last year, Miller confided, his professionalism slipping just enough to give me a weapon. Claimed they were burying asbestos. Turned out she just wanted to break their contract so she could list the land herself. Thanks for the info, Inspector. Miller got in his van. As he drove past Karen, he didn't stop to give her a report. He just shook his head. I watched Karen from across the field. She hammered her steering wheel in frustration. Her nuclear option had failed. The environmental attack was a dud. But as I watched her drive away, Maria Santos's warning echoed in my head. She's drowning. Desperation makes people sloppy, but also makes them dangerous. Karen had tried intimidation. She had tried the law. She had tried the state. All that was left now was the fraud. She had buyers coming this weekend. Buyers who were promised a gated ranch community. I looked at the half-finished wall. It wouldn't be fully cured until next week. There was still a gap where the gate would go, a 12-foot opening that was currently blocked only by temporary fencing. If she was going to make a move, if she was going to try to force her way through to stage one last fraudulent showing to save her career, it would be this Saturday. I pulled out my phone and called Ray. Ray, I need a favor. Can we accelerate the gate installation? Electronics won't be ready, Jake. We can hang the steel, but it won't be powered. I don't need power, I said, watching the sun set over the concrete barrier. I just need a heavy. And Ray, bring the welder. I want to make sure that once it's shut, only God or a cutting torch can open it. You expecting a sea, Jake? No, Ray. I'm expecting a circus. And I want to make sure the clowns can't get in. Saturday morning arrived with the kind of deceptive beauty that only Texas knows how to produce. The sky was a vast, cloudless dome of cyan, the air crisp before the inevitable heat of the day set in. It was perfect weather for a barbecue, a ball game, or, if you were Karen Bradshaw, a high-stakes con job. Ray Molina and I had been up since 4 a.m. The wall was technically finished, a gray scar of cured concrete slicing the landscape in two. But the gate, the masterpiece, was just being hung. It wasn't a decorative garden gate. It was a 16-foot span of tubular steel, reinforced with mesh heavy enough to stop a charging rhino. We hadn't hooked up the solar electronics yet, so we secured it the old-fashioned way, a heavy-duty logging chain and a padlock the size of a fist. "That ain't going nowhere," Ray said, wiping grease from his hands as he tested the hinge. It swung with the silent, heavy grace of a bank vault door. "You expecting guests?" "The Hendersons," I said, checking the time, 9:45 a.m. Maria told me Karen has her whale clients coming for a final site inspection at 10. They're looking at the big estate lot, right on the fence line. The one she promised has exclusive ranch access. That's the one. I pulled a folding chair out of the truck bed, set it up right behind the gate, and poured a cup of coffee. I sat there like a sentinel, shotgun leaning safely against the truck, unloaded, mostly for visual effect, watching the road on the other side of the barrier. At 9:58 a.m., the caravan appeared. It was theater, pure theater. Karen's white BMW led the way, washed and waxed to a shine that hurt the eyes. Following close behind was a black Range Rover, the universal vehicle of people with more money than time. They pulled up to the end of the public cul-de-sac. Karen hopped out, radiating that manic Realtor of the Year energy. She was wearing a wide-brimmed hat and a dress that looked like it belonged at the Kentucky Derby. She gestured grandly toward the landscape, pointing at my hills, my creek, my cattle grazing in the distance. I could see the couple getting out of the Range Rover. The husband was tall, wearing pristine boots that had never seen mud. The wife looked skeptical, shielding her eyes from the sun. Karen led them toward my gate, chatting animatedly. She didn't look at the wall. She acted like it didn't exist, or like it was just a temporary nuisance. She walked right up to the steel bars, laid a manicured hand on the metal, and rattled it. Locked. "Oh, silly me," she laughed, a high-pitched sound that grated like a rusty hinge. She turned to the couple. "The groundskeeper must have locked the security gate early. Just a moment. Let me get him to open it for our private tour." She peered through the mesh, her smile tight enough to snap. Jake, be a dear and open up. I have Mr. and Mrs. Henderson here for their inspection." I didn't stand up. I just took a sip of coffee. "Morning, Karen." "Can't do that." Karen's eyes widened, communicating a desperate plea. "Play along and I'll make it worth your while." "Jake, don't be difficult. The Hendersons are very interested in the community access features. Just open the gate so we can drive down to the creek." Mr. Henderson stepped forward. He looked like a man used to getting what he paid for. "Is there a problem, Ms. Bradshaw? You said this was a coded entry for residents." "It is. It absolutely is," Karen stammered, sweat beginning to ruin her foundation. "It's just new system installation. Jake here is just confused about the schedule." I stood up then. I walked slowly to the gate, the gravel crunching under my boots loud in the sudden silence. I looked past Karen, directly at Mr. Henderson. "Sir, my name is Jake Riverside. I own this land. Everything behind this fence." "Nice to meet you," Henderson said, confused. "Are you the HOA ground manager?" "No, sir. I'm a rancher, and this is an HOA property. It's private agricultural land. There is no community access. There never was. There never will be." The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush a car. Karen let out a noise that was half laugh, half choke. "Oh, Jake, stop joking. You know the easement agreement." "There is no easement." I cut her off, my voice flat and hard. I pulled a folded document from my back pocket, a copy of the cease and desist letter my lawyer had sent her, along with the county survey map. I slipped it through the bars to Mr. Henderson. "Mr. Henderson, that's a certified county survey. The red line is the property boundary. Ms. Bradshaw here has been trespassing for 6 months. If you buy that house expecting to drive on this road or picnic by that creek, you'll be arrested for criminal trespass. I have cameras, and I prosecute every single violator." Henderson unfolded the map. He looked at the red line. He looked at the wall. Then he looked at Karen. The temperature seemed to drop 20 degrees. "Karen," Henderson said, his voice dangerously calm, "this contract specifically lists deeded ranch access as a primary amenity. It's valued at $150,000 of the purchase price. It's a negotiation." Karen shrieked, her facade crumbling like dry cake. "We are in the process of formalizing the agreement. Mr. Riverside is just holding out for a better price. We'll have it settled by closing." "I'm not selling," I said. "Not for $1 million. Not for $10 million. This is my grandfather's land. It's not an amenity for your subdivision." Mrs. Henderson spoke for the first time. She pointed a manicured finger at Karen. You told us the gate was just to keep the cows in. You told us we owned rights to the creek. You will? I promise. Karen was pleading now, reaching for Mr. Henderson's arm. He pulled away as if she were contagious. Let's go, Linda, Henderson said. He dropped the survey map on the ground at Karen's feet. We're done here. Wait. Richard, please. The house has a pool. The view. The view of a concrete wall? Henderson snapped. I'm calling my lawyer. I want our earnest money back by Monday morning. If you lied about the land, God knows what else is wrong with the house. They turned and walked back to the Range Rover. The door slammed with the finality of a coffin lid. The engine roared to life, and the SUV reversed aggressively, spinning tires as it sped away from the cul-de-sac. Karen stood alone at the gate. The dust from their departure settled on her hat. She looked small. She looked ruined. She turned back to me, her face twisted into a mask of pure hatred. Tears were cutting tracks through her makeup. You realize what you just did? She whispered, her voice trembling. That was a $1.2 million sale. That was my commission. That was my life. No, Karen, I said, locking the heavy padlock with a satisfying click. That was a lie. I just exposed it. I will destroy you, she screamed, grabbing the steel bars and shaking them impotently. I will sue you into the ground. I will burn this ranch to the ash. Get off my fence, Karen, I said, turning my back on her. I've got cattle to feed. I walked away. Behind me, she was still screaming, a ghost raging against a machine she couldn't break. I sat back down in the folding chair next to Ray, who had watched the whole exchange with a sandwich in one hand. That went well. Ray chewed thoughtfully. You think she's done? Not even close, I said, listening to the BMW engine redline as she finally peeled out. She's desperate now. The money's gone. The reputation is gone. All she has left is rage. I looked at the massive steel gate. Ray, how fast can you get the electrics hooked up? I have a feeling she's gonna come back tonight, and she won't be coming to talk. Ray nodded, putting away his sandwich. I'll call the Sparky. We'll work through the night. Good. Because a wounded animal is the most dangerous thing in the woods. As the sun climbed higher, baking the fresh concrete, I knew the Cold War was over. The shooting war, metaphorically speaking, was about to begin. Karen had lost her buyers. She had lost her dignity. Now, she was going to try to take my peace. But she forgot one thing. I had built a fortress, and I was ready for the siege. The sun went down, but the lights at the construction site stayed on. Ray Molina and I weren't taking any chances. We worked through the twilight, the blue arc of the welder flashbanging the deepening dark as we finalized the hinge pins on a massive steel gate. That's it, Ray said around 9 p.m., snapping the cover onto the control box. Maglocks are live. Solenoids are engaged. Jake, that gate is currently holding with 1,200 pounds of magnetic force, plus the mechanical deadbolt. You could hit this with a freight train, and the train would lose. Good, I said, handing him a cold beer from the cooler, because I don't think a freight train is coming. I think something nastier is on its way. Ray packed up his tools but left his heavy excavator parked perpendicular to the wall on the inside, a secondary barricade, just in case. He left around 10 p.m., promising to return at first light. I didn't go to bed. I sat in the darkened living room of my ranch house, watching the new high-definition monitors that fed from the perimeter cameras. The green glow of night vision painted my property in ghostly shades of monochrome. Sarah came in, wrapping her robe tight. She's not going to stop, is she? Not until she hits something she can't break. I replied, eyes fixed on the screen. She lost the Henderson sale. That was her mortgage payment. That was her lifestyle. She's cornered. The hours ticked by. Midnight. 1 a.m. The coyotes started yipping down by the creek, a lonely, hungry sound. At 2:43 a.m., the motion sensors tripped. A pair of headlights crested the hill on the county road. They weren't moving with the caution of a lost driver. They were moving with purpose. I grabbed my phone and the keys to the truck. Sarah, call Deputy Martinez. Tell him we have an intruder attempting to breach the perimeter. Tell him it's escalating. Be careful, Jake. I was out the door before she finished the sentence. I drove my truck down to the gate, keeping my lights off until I was 50 yards away. Then I hit the high beams. The scene was illuminated in stark, blinding relief. It was a white BMW X5. But it wasn't just parked. It was revving. Karen Bradshaw was behind the wheel. Even from this distance, I could see she was disheveled. The perfect hair was wild. She was screaming something inside the cabin, pounding on the steering wheel. She backed up. The reverse lights bathed the cul-de-sac in red. She reversed all the way to the stop sign, giving herself about 100 yards of runway. She wouldn't, I whispered to myself. She's crazy, but she's not. The BMW engine roared. A high-pitched mechanical scream of German engineering pushed the red line. Tires squealed on the asphalt, creating a cloud of burnt rubber smoke. She dropped the hammer. The SUV launched forward. She wasn't slowing down. She was accelerating. She was aiming dead center at the seam of my 16-foot steel gate. She thought physics was negotiable. She thought her $80,000 luxury tank could smash through my $50,000 fortification. I winced and braced myself. Crunch. The sound was sickening, like a bomb going off inside a tin can. It wasn't the sound of metal yielding. It was the sound of metal dying. The BMW hit the gate at probably 40 miles per hour. My wall didn't budge. It didn't even shudder. The steel reinforced concrete held the hinges rigid as stone. The car, however, crumpled like aluminum foil. The front hood accordioned instantly. The radiator exploded in a geyser of steam and coolant. The windshield shattered into a spiderweb of diamonds. The airbags detonated, filling the cabin with white powder. Silence rushed back in, broken only by the hiss of the ruined engine and the frantic honking of the car alarm. I drove up to the gate, staying on my side. I didn't open it. I wasn't going to give her a chance to slip through into chaos. I climbed the ladder Ray had built into the side of the wall and looked down. Karen was wrestling with the airbag, coughing. She kicked the door open and stumbled out. She was unhurt, thanks to modern safety standards, but she was clearly intoxicated on rage or wine or both. She looked up and saw me silhouetted against the moon on top of my fortress. "Open this gate," she screamed, her voice slurring. She picked up a piece of her own shattered headlight and threw it at the wall. It bounced off harmlessly. "You ruined my life. You redneck bastard. You blocked my road. I have rights." "Karen," I shouted down, my voice calm. "You just totaled your car against a permitted agricultural structure. You're lucky you aren't dead." "I'm going to sue you for the car," she shrieked, stumbling toward the keypad and smashing her fist against it. "This is an illegal booby trap." "It's a gate, Karen. You're the one who used it as a crash test dummy." Blue and red lights flashed in the distance, getting closer. The cavalry was arriving. Karen saw the lights and panicked. She looked at her ruined car, then at the wall, then at the approaching sheriff's cruiser. She tried to run, but her high heel snapped on the gravel. She fell hard, skinning her knees, and just sat there in the dirt, sobbing. Deputy Martinez pulled up, his spotlight cutting through the steam. He stepped out, hand resting on his holster, taking in the scene. The destroyed luxury car. The immaculate, unscratched gate. The weeping woman in designer clothes covered in airbag dust. "Well," Martinez said, tipping his hat to me up on the wall. "Looks like the wall won." "Evening, deputy," I called down. "I have video footage of the assault on the property, if you need it." Martinez walked over to Karen. "Ms. Bradshaw, are you okay?" He attacked me. Karen pointed a shaking finger at me. He moved the gate. He made me hit it." Martinez looked at the multi-ton concrete pylons. "Ma'am, unless Mr. Riverside is Superman, I don't think he moved a concrete wall into your path. Can I smell your breath, please?" "I had a glass of wine with dinner," she stammered, "to calm my nerves. Because of him. Turn around, please. Hands behind your back." The click of the handcuffs was the sweetest sound I'd heard in years. "Karen Bradshaw," Martinez recited, "you are under arrest for driving under the influence, reckless endangerment, and criminal mischief in the first degree. You have the right to remain silent." She didn't remain silent. She screamed all the way to the cruiser. She threatened Martinez's job. She threatened to call the governor. She threatened to buy the police department and fire everyone. As they loaded her into the back seat, she pressed her face against the window, staring at me. Her eyes weren't just angry anymore. They were empty. It was a look of someone who realizes the world doesn't obey them. Martinez walked back to the gate. "Hell of a fence, Jake." "Thanks, deputy. Rated good work. I'll need that footage for the DA. This is pretty cut and dry." She calls about, "What? $5,000 in damage to the gate?" I looked at the scuff mark on the black paint. "About $50 for a can of touch-up paint. But let's call it $5,000 for emotional distress. Get some sleep, Jake. It's over for tonight." I watched the cruiser drive away, taking the noise and the chaos with it. A tow truck arrived 20 minutes later to drag the carcass of the BMW away. I stood on my wall for a long time, listening to the silence of the ranch return. The cattle were lowing softly in the distance. The wind rustled the mesquite trees. It felt like a victory. But as I climbed down, a thought nagged at me. Men like me, we know when a storm is done. The air clears. The pressure drops. But this didn't feel clear yet. Karen was rich or projected the image of it. She was connected, and she was humiliated. The law would punish her, sure, but a narcissist doesn't accept punishment. They seek revenge. She would make bail. She would come back. And next time, she wouldn't come with a car. She would come with a story. I checked the news on my phone before heading inside. The Millbrook County Fair was next weekend, the biggest public gathering of the year. If I were Karen and I wanted to destroy the man who humiliated me, that's where I'd do it. I walked into the house. Sarah was waiting with hot tea. Is it over? She asked. The battle is, I said, kissing her forehead. But the war? I think she's got one last charge in her. I slept like a baby that night. Let her come. My wall was standing, and I was just getting started. You'd think spending a night in the drunk tank would humble a person. You'd think the cold reality of steel bars and a toilet with no seat would be a wake-up call. But for a narcissist like Karen Bradshaw, consequences aren't lessons. They're just fresh ammunition. She made bail by Monday noon. Her ex-husband, likely terrified she'd drag his name into the mud, wired the money. She walked out of county jail not with her head down, but with a limp that looked suspiciously theatrical and a bruise on her cheek from the airbag that she was already figuring out how to market. By Tuesday evening, the narrative had shifted. I was in the barn, graining the horses, when Sarah came running out with her iPad. Her face was pale. Jake, you need to see this. Channel 8 News. She tapped the screen. There was Karen, sitting in her living room, which was meticulously staged with sad beige furniture and a box of tissues. The bruise on her cheek was highlighted with makeup to look worse than it was. A reporter, a young woman looking for a sensational scoop, was nodding sympathetically. I was just trying to get home, Karen sobbed on the screen, dabbing a dry eye. That wall! It appeared out of nowhere. It's a spite fence, a symbol of hatred. He built it to segregate our community. And when I went to ask him why, he laughed while I crashed. He watched me bleed. The reporter turned to the camera, voice grave. A local real estate leader, hospitalized after a collision with what some are calling the wall of division. Tonight we ask, how far is too far when it comes to property rights? I stared at the screen, my blood running cold. She had twisted reality so completely that I barely recognized the event I had witnessed with my own eyes. She wasn't a drunk driver who rammed a gate. She was the martyr of suburban oppression. She's lying, Sarah said, her voice trembling with anger. We have the video. We have the police report. The truth moves slow, Sarah, I said, handing the iPad back. Lies move at the speed of the internet. I checked Facebook. The Millbrook Community Safety page Karen ran was on fire. Hundreds of comments from people who didn't know a heifer from a Hereford were calling for my head. Boycott Riverside Ranch. Tear down the wall. Justice for Karen. She was organizing a rally, and she wasn't planning to do it at the courthouse. She was targeting the Millbrook County Fair this Saturday. The fair is sacred ground around here. It's where 4-H kids show their animals, where the grandmas compete for the best peach cobbler, and where the community comes together to celebrate our agricultural roots. I've been the senior cattle judge for 10 years. It's my turf. And Karen was coming to burn it down. She's going to ambush you, Sarah said. She knows you'll be on the main stage for the awards. She wants a spectacle. If she wants a show, I said, putting on my hat, I'll give her one, but she's forgetting one thing. What's that? The fair isn't the internet. Out there, you can't delete the comments you don't like. Out there, you have to look people in the eye. Wednesday and Thursday were a blur of preparation. I wasn't just grooming cattle. I was preparing a dossier. I called Tom Bellamy, my lawyer. I called Deputy Martinez. I even called Inspector Miller from the Environmental Quality Office. Tom, I need copies of everything. I told him. The fraud complaints, the cease and desist, the DUI report, the canceled contracts from the Hendersons. Blow them up. Make them poster-sized. You planning a legal seminar, Jake? Tom asked. No, I'm planning an exorcism. Saturday morning dawned hot and humid. the air thick with the smell of funnel cake, sawdust, and livestock. The fairgrounds were packed. Thousands of people from 3 counties were milling about. I was at the main livestock pavilion, judging the senior Angus division. I could feel the tension. People were whispering. I saw neighbors looking at me sideways. Good people who had seen Karen's tearful interview and didn't know what to believe. That's the poison of a liar like Karen. She plants doubt in the soil where friendship used to grow. At 1 p.m., the protest arrived. It was smaller than I expected, but loud. Karen led a group of maybe 15 people. Mostly her inner circle from the HOA and a few bored teenagers she'd probably paid. They were carrying signs. Tear down the wall, bully rancher, and end rural privilege. Karen was wearing a neck brace. A neck brace. She hadn't been wearing one when she bailed out. It was a prop, pure and simple. She marched right up to the edge of the show ring, a megaphone in her hand. Channel 8 was there naturally, so was the local paper. The camera swung away from the prize bulls and pointed at the weeping woman in the neck brace. Ladies and gentlemen of Millbrook. Karen's amplified voice cut through the noise of the crowd. The fairground went quiet. Even the carnival music seemed to fade. I am here to demand justice, she shouted, pointing a trembling finger at me in the center of the ring. That man, Jake Riverside, he is a danger to this community. He built an illegal blockade that nearly killed me. He is hoarding land that belongs to the people. The crowd murmured. I stood there, holding the blue ribbon I was about to award to a 12-year-old girl named Emily. I smiled at Emily, handed her the ribbon, and whispered, "Good job, darling. Take your steer back to the stall." I waited until Emily was safe. Then I turned to Karen. She, emboldened by my silence, stepped into the ring. Her heels sank into the dirt. Look at him. Arrogant. He thinks he owns this town. He thinks he can hurt women and get away with it because he's a good old boy. Are you done, Karen? I asked. My voice wasn't amplified, but in the hush of the arena, it carried. I'm done when that wall comes down, she shrieked to the cameras. I'm done when you pay for my medical bills. I'm done when this community sees you for the monster you are. I walked over to the announcer's booth. I took the microphone from the stunned MC. Folks, I said, my voice booming over the PA system, calm as a Sunday sermon. I apologize for the interruption. Ms. Bradshaw here seems to have confused the county fair with a reality TV show. Laughter rippled through the stands. Karen's face flushed red. This isn't a joke, she screamed. He nearly killed me. Since we have a media here, I continued, nodding at the Channel 8 cameraman, and since Ms. Bradshaw has raised serious accusations about my character and my property, I think it's only fair we look at the facts. You all know me. You know my daddy. You know this land. I signaled to Ray Molina, who was standing by the large digital scoreboard usually used to display cattle weights. Ray, go ahead and plug in a laptop. The giant screen flickered to life. Ms. Bradshaw claims I attacked her, I said. She claims the wall appeared out of nowhere. She claims she is a victim. On the screen, high-definition video footage began to play. It was the night of the crash. The timestamp was clearly visible, 2:43 a.m. The crowd gasped as they watched the white BMW stop, reverse, and then accelerate deliberately into the gate. They watched the impact. They watched Karen stumble out, screaming abuse, clearly unharmed and belligerent. That's doctored, Karen yelled, but her voice was wavering. She looked around, realizing the audience was turning. And regarding her claims of community access, I continued. The screen changed. It showed a document. This is a sworn affidavit from Mr. Richard Henderson. He was Ms. Bradshaw's client last week. He canceled his $1.2 million purchase. Why? Because Ms. Bradshaw sold him rights to my land that she didn't own. I looked at the crowd. She's not fighting for you. She's fighting because she promised buyers she could sell them my ranch road, and she got caught. She's broke, folks. And she tried to break me to fix her bank account. Karen looked like a cornered rat. The neck brace suddenly seemed very heavy. She lowered the megaphone. This is slander, she hissed, backing away. No, Karen, I said, stepping down from the booth and walking toward the fence. Slander is spoken. Libel is written. But the truth is just evidence. I pointed to the back of the arena, and I believe there are some people here who would like a word with you about that truth. At the entrance of the pavilion, Deputy Martinez was standing, and next to him was a man in a suit I hadn't seen before. He was holding a briefcase and wearing a badge on his belt, the Texas Real Estate Commission investigator. Karen saw him. The color drained from her face. So fast, she looked like a ghost. She dropped the megaphone. It hit the dirt with a screech of feedback. She looked at me, then at the investigator, then at the hostile crowd. The victim narrative had evaporated. The bully narrative had backfired. She was naked in the court of public opinion, and the judge had just banged the gavel. "You set me up," she mouthed silently. I tipped my hat. "Welcome to the fair, Karen." The silence that followed Karen's exposure at the Millbrook County Fair was heavy, but it wasn't empty. It was the sound of 1,000 people realizing they had been played. The Texas Real Estate Commission, TREC investigator, a man named Mr. Vance, stepped over the low fence of the show ring. He didn't look angry. He looked like an accountant about to deliver a chaotic audit. He walked straight up to Karen, who was still clutching her neck brace like a lifeline, though she had curiously stopped limping in her panic. "Ms. Bradshaw," Vance said, his voice cutting through the humid air, "I am serving you an immediate emergency suspension of your broker's license, effective this second. You can't do that here." Karen hissed, looking frantically for an exit that didn't exist. "This is a public event." "We tried to serve you at your office, but it was locked," Vance replied dryly. "We tried your home, but you weren't there. Since you decided to hold a press conference, we figured this was the best time to ensure the public is protected." He shoved a thick envelope into her hand. "You are facing 18 counts of fraud, misrepresentation of property boundaries, and conducting sales without proper authorization. We also have reports of earnest money misappropriation." The crowd gasped. Misappropriation. That's a fancy legal word for theft. Deputy Martinez stepped in then. "Ms. Bradshaw, your bail conditions for the DUI specifically prohibited you from harassing Mr. Riverside or approaching his property. Staging a protest and screaming defamatory accusations at him constitutes a violation." "I was exercising my First Amendment rights," she shrieked. "You were inciting a riot based on false pretenses," Martinez corrected, pulling out the handcuffs again. "Turn around." This time, she didn't fight. The fight had left her the moment the video played on the Jumbotron. She slumped, the fake neck brace sliding askew, looking less like a queen and more like a jester whose act had finally flopped. As Martinez led her away through the parting crowd, there were no boos. There was just a pitying silence. It was the end of the show. The weeks that followed were a blur of legal paperwork, but for the first time in 6 months, none of it was aimed at me. The Karen collapse happened fast. It turns out, when you build a career on lies, you don't have a safety net when you fall. First came the civil lawsuits. The Hendersons, the couple who walked away from the $1.2 million sale, led the charge. They sued for fraud and emotional distress. Then came the Parkers and the Johnsons, other buyers she had promised exclusive ranch access to. They formed a class action suit that looked more like a firing squad. Then, the HOA turned on her. This was the sweetest part. Once Karen was in custody, the other board members finally got access to the books. They found the landscaping fund was empty. The money for the new pool? Gone. She had been borrowing from the HOA reserves to cover her personal debts and the lease payments on that white BMW. The new interim president, a retired accountant named Bob, called me personally. "Mr. Riverside," Bob said, sounding exhausted, "we are dropping all complaints against your property. We are also suing Karen for embezzlement." We had no idea. "I know Bob. She's good at what she does." Or was. The criminal trial was scheduled for November, but it never happened. Faced with the video evidence, the TREC investigation, and the mountain of financial crimes, Karen's lawyer, a court-appointed public defender, because she could no longer afford her Dallas team, advised her to cut a deal. I was there for the sentencing hearing. I wanted to see it finished. Karen walked into the courtroom, wearing a gray jumpsuit. The designer clothes were gone. The makeup was gone. The arrogance was replaced by a hollow, shell-shocked expression. She pleaded guilty to felony fraud, criminal mischief, and DWI. The judge, a stern woman named Judge Reynolds who had no patience for white-collar nonsense, looked over her glasses at Karen. "Ms. Bradshaw, you use your position of trust to prey on home buyers. You used the legal system to harass an innocent neighbor. You wasted thousands of dollars of taxpayer money on false environmental reports. You are a menace to this community." The gavel came down like a hammer strike. The sentence, 5 years probation, permanent revocation of a real estate license, $280,000 in restitution to the HOA and the defrauded buyers, 1,000 hours of community service, a permanent restraining order. She was not allowed within 1,000 feet of Riverside Ranch or any of my family members. She avoided prison time only because it was her first conviction and the jails were overcrowded. But the financial sentence was a death blow. To pay the restitution, she had to liquidate everything. The mansion on the hill, the symbol of her status, the fortress from which she had launched her attacks, was seized. I drove by the day the bank put the sign up. It wasn't a for sale sign. It was an auction foreclosure sign. The BMW was already gone, totaled in the crash, and the insurance company had denied the claim because the damage was caused by an intentional criminal act. She still owed $60,000 on the lease. Karen Bradshaw, the queen of Millbrook Estates, was now homeless, jobless, and buried in $500,000 of debt. The final act of her tragedy played out a month later. I was at the feed store, loading sacks of grain, when I saw a beat-up Honda Civic pull into the gas pumps. The door opened, and Karen got out. She looked 10 years older. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun. She was wearing a uniform, a blue smock that said greeter for a big box discount store in the next county over. She saw me. She froze, the gas nozzle in her hand. For a moment, I thought she might scream. I thought she might try to summon one last burst of entitlement. But she just looked at me with tired, defeated eyes. She looked at my truck, then at her rust bucket car. She looked down, turned away, and focused on pumping her gas. I didn't say anything. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. The wall I built had done its job. It had reflected her own chaos back onto her until it consumed her. I finished loading my truck and drove back to the ranch. As I approached the gate, my beautiful impenetrable steel and concrete gate, I pressed a remote. The heavy steel swung open silently. I drove through, and it closed behind me with a reassuring thud. The air smelled of hay and rain. The cattle were grazing peacefully near the creek. The silence was absolute. No horns, no screaming, no threats. My phone rang. It was Ray Molina. "Hey, Jake." Ray's voice was cheerful. "You'll never guess who just called me." "Who?" "The new HOA board. They want to hire me." "To do what?" "They want to build a privacy wall along the rest of the property line. So they want to make sure the residents know exactly where the boundary is, so they don't bother you. They want to match your design." I laughed. It started as a chuckle and rolled into a belly laugh that scared the barn cats. "Ray," I said, wiping a tear from my eye. "You tell them I'd be honored, but tell them they have to pay for it themselves. They already cut the check, Jake. Looks like you started a trend. Good fences really do make good neighbors." "No, Ray," I said, looking out over the land my grandfather cleared. "Good fences keep the bad neighbors out. Respect makes good neighbors." The war was over. The fortress stood tall. And for the first time in 6 months, the Riverside Ranch was truly, finally safe. But as I sat on the porch that evening, watching the sun dip below the horizon, I realized the wall wasn't just a barrier. It was a monument to the simple fact that you can push a working man only so far before he pushes back. And when he pushes back, he brings concrete. Spring hits the Texas Hill Country differently than anywhere else on earth. One day it's gray and brown, and the next, the blue bonnets and Indian paint brushes explode across the fields like a painter kicked over his bucket. 6 months had passed since the flashing lights and the handcuffs. 6 months since the last BMW engine revved in anger at my gate. The silence was the first thing I noticed. For weeks after Karen's arrest, I'd wake up at 5 a.m. bracing for the horn, my muscles tense for a fight. But the horn never came. The only sound was the wind in the pecan trees, the distant call of a mourning dove, and the steady, rhythmic chewing of cattle. Bessie, the heifer Karen had nearly crippled in the very first skirmish of this war, finally dropped her calf on a Tuesday morning. I found them in the lower pasture, tucked away near the creek. It was a bull calf, 80 pounds of solid muscle, jet black, and kicking at the world with an attitude that reminded me of my grandfather. He stood up on wobbly legs, let out a strong bellow, and started nursing. I watched them for a long time, leaning against the bed of my truck. "We'll call him Judge," I said to Sarah later that morning over breakfast. "Judge," she smiled, pouring coffee. "Yeah, because he's the final verdict. She tried to kill him before he was born. Now he's here, strong and healthy, and she's bagging groceries in Waco." The ranch wasn't just surviving, it was thriving. With the stress gone, the herd's weight gain was up. My feed conversion ratios were the best they'd been in 5 years. And, true to the insurance adjuster's word, My liability premiums dropped by 18% once a controlled access security barrier was officially certified. The wall was literally paying for itself. But the biggest change wasn't on my side of the concrete. It was on the other side. The Millbrook Estates HOA underwent what historians might call a regime change. After forensic audit revealed Karen had treated the community funds like her personal piggy bank, the residents voted in a new board faster than you can say foreclosure. The new president, Bob Miller, was a retired structural engineer. He didn't drive a luxury SUV. He drove a Ford F-150. He didn't wear designer suits. He wore cargo shorts. Bob called me 2 weeks after taking office. Jake, we're holding the quarterly meeting next Thursday. We'd like you to come. Bob, I'm not a member of your HOA. I thought we established that with 12 feet of concrete. You're not a member, Bob agreed, but you're a neighbor, and we want to make things right. Plus, there's barbecue. I went. I wore my clean boots and my good hat. I expected awkwardness. I expected resentment. What I got was a standing ovation. When I walked into the community center, 40 people stood up and clapped. These were the people Karen had lied to, the people she had manipulated into thinking I was a monster. Now that the fog of her war had lifted, they saw the truth. Mr. Riverside, Bob said, shaking my hand at the podium, we wanted to formally apologize for the harassment you endured, and we wanted to show you the new amendment to our bylaws. He handed me a document, Section 14, Paragraph C. The residents had already nicknamed it the Karen Clause. It read, the Homeowners Association explicitly recognizes the sovereignty of adjacent agricultural properties. No HOA funds, resources, or legal actions shall be used to interfere with, impede, or harass lawful farming operations. Any board member found violating this clause faces immediate removal and personal liability. We also voted to reimburse you for the legal fees you incurred fighting our previous president, Bob added, handing me a check for $4,500. It didn't cover the wall, but it covered the lawyers. You didn't have to do that, I said, looking at the check. We didn't do it for you, Jake, a woman in the front row said. It was Mrs. Henderson, the buyer who had walked away from the $1.2 million deal. She had ended up buying a different house in the neighborhood, one that actually had legal deeds. We did it so we can look ourselves in the mirror. Good fences make good neighbors, but so does common decency. That evening turned into the best barbecue I'd been to in years. I stood around drinking Shiner Bock with men who worked in IT and finance, explaining the difference between hay and alfalfa, while they explained cryptocurrency to me. I still don't get it, but I listened. We weren't enemies anymore. We were just folks living on different sides of a line, respecting the line. And the wall itself? It stopped being a scar and started becoming a landmark. Ray Molina's work was built to last, but nature has a way of softening even the hardest edges. We planted Virginia creeper and wild jasmine along the base. Within months, the harsh gray concrete was draped in a living tapestry of green. It looked less like a prison wall and more like the ramparts of an ancient castle. Ray stopped by one afternoon to check on the gate hydraulics. He was driving a brand new truck with a custom wrap on the side. Molina Construction, Agricultural Security Specialists. Business is good, Ray? I asked, admiring the truck. Good? Jake, it's insane. Ray laughed, patting the fender. Since your story hit the news, I've had calls from ranchers all over the state. Everyone has a Karen problem. Everyone wants a Riverside wall. I've got a backlog of 6 months. You should pay me a commission. I bought the beer, didn't I? Ray grinned. But seriously, Jake, you started a movement. People are realizing they don't have to take the bullying. You showed them that no is a complete sentence, especially when it's written in rebar. The ultimate closure, however, came from the most unexpected source. The foreclosure auction for Karen's mansion happened in late winter. It was bought by a young couple from Austin, tech money but humble roots, Mike and Jenny. Mike wandered down to the gate one Saturday while I was checking the mail. Mr. Riverside? He asked, keeping a respectful distance. Just Jake, son. I'm Mike. We bought the Bradshaw place. I know. Welcome to the neighborhood. Mike looked at the massive gate, then at the camera, then at the wall looming over us. I just wanted to say, we love the wall, Mike said earnestly. The realtor tried to tell us it was an eyesore, but we see it as a feature. It's quiet. It's secure. And knowing the history, it reminds us to be humble. He paused and added, also, Jenny was wondering, is it true you sell beef directly? We'd rather buy local than from the supermarket. I smiled. The cycle was complete. The house that had been the command center for the war against my ranch was now home to my customers. "Tell Jenny come by on Tuesday," I said, opening the gate just enough to shake his hand. "I'll give you the neighbor discount." As I walked back up the driveway, the sun setting over the hills, I felt a deep, abiding satisfaction. The wall had cost me $52,000. It had cost me sleepless nights. It had cost me a lot of anger. But looking around at the peace, the respect, and the quiet dignity of my land, I realized it was the best investment I'd ever made. I hadn't just built a wall to keep a crazy woman out. I had built a future where my family could live in peace. I sat on the porch, Sarah joining me as the stars began to poke through the twilight. The crickets were chirping. Judge, the new calf, let out a sleepy lowing sound from the barn. "It's quiet," Sarah whispered. "It's perfect," I replied. But life has a funny way of offering one last surprise. Just as I thought the book was closed, my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was an email from a production company in Los Angeles. Subject, Rights Inquiry, the Texas Wall Movie Project. I stared at the screen and started to laugh. "You can't make this stuff up." That's what Ray Molina told me when the black SUVs rolled up to my gate 3 weeks after the initial email. It wasn't Karen this time. It wasn't the police. It was a location scout and 2 producers from a streaming service whose name rhymes with Betflix. The email I had received wasn't spam. It turns out the viral video of Karen's meltdown at the county fair had reached millions of views. The internet, in its infinite hunger for justice, had turned the Wall of Millbrook into a modern legend. Mr. Riverside, the producer, a fast-talking guy named Zach who wore sneakers that cost more than my tractor, said as he stood in my living room, "This isn't just a property dispute. It's a zeitgeist moment. It's Yellowstone meets Home Alone. It's the ultimate story of the little guy standing his ground." "I'm not exactly little, Zach," I said, pouring coffee. "And I'm not an actor." "We don't want you to act," Zach said, eyes wide with excitement. "We want the rights. We want to make a limited series based on your story. The Fortress, a Texas tale. We want to film the exteriors right here. We want the wall to be a character." Sarah and I sat at the kitchen table, the same table where we had planned our defense against Karen's lawsuits just a few months ago. We looked at the contract. The number on the page had a lot of zeros. Enough zeros to pay off the remaining mortgage on the ranch. Enough zeros to buy a new combine harvester. Enough zeros to set up college funds for all 4 grandkids and still have enough left over for a very long vacation. "What about Karen?" Sarah asked, her teacher's instinct always looking for the catch. "Does she get a cut?" Zach laughed. It was a cold, Hollywood laugh. "Absolutely not. Public records, court transcripts, and viral news footage. She's a public figure who committed felonies. We don't need her permission. In fact, our legal department says she can't touch a dime of profit due to Son of Sam laws regarding profiting from criminal notoriety." That was a cherry on top. We would get paid. The ranch would be immortalized. And Karen? She would have to watch her humiliation reenacted in 4K resolution, knowing she inadvertently funded the retirement of the man she tried to destroy. I picked up my pen. "One condition," I said. "Anything," Zach promised. "You hire Ray Molina as the on-set construction consultant. And you don't paint me as a saint. Just paint me as a man who wanted to be left alone." "Deal." I signed the paper. And just like that, the war didn't just end. It paid dividends. Filming started in the fall. It was surreal watching a handsome actor in a cowboy hat pretending to be me, yelling at an actress playing Karen. The actress was good. She nailed the screeching entitlement perfectly. But the real satisfaction came from the grapevine. Betty Coleman, my spy in the county records office, gave me the final update on Karen Bradshaw. She's in Dallas. Betty told me one afternoon while dropping off mail. Living in a 1-bedroom apartment near the airport. She's working telemarketing sales. Telemarketing? I chuckled. Well, she always did like to talk. And get this, Betty leaned in. She tried to sue the production company when the casting announcement came out, represented herself because no lawyer would take the case. The judge dismissed it in 10 minutes and ordered her to pay the studio's legal fees. Karen was trapped in a hell of her own making. Every time she turned on the TV, she'd see the trailer for the show. Every time she went online, she'd see memes of her face crashing into my gate. She hadn't just lost her house and her money. She had lost her narrative. She was no longer the hero of her own story. She was a punchline of mine, and that was a punishment far worse than jail. Life at Riverside Ranch settled into a rhythm that was sweeter than before. The movie money hit the bank, and for the first time in my life, the low-level hum of financial anxiety that every rancher lives with simply vanished. We fixed up the barn. We bought the neighbor's 20-acre parcel to the north legally with a handshake and a check. We secured the land for the next generation. My son, who works in Austin, came up for the weekend with the grandkids. Little Timmy, 5 years old, ran straight for the wall. "Grandpa, is this the castle wall?" he asked, running his hand along the ivy-covered concrete. I picked him up and sat him on my shoulders. "It sure is, buddy. It's the wall that keeps the dragons out." "Are there dragons?" "Not anymore." I smiled. We chased them all away. That evening, after the family had gone to bed, I walked out to the gate one last time. The structure stood silent and strong under the Texas moon. The steel was cool to the touch. The concrete was unyielding. It was a physical manifestation of a spiritual truth I had learned the hard way. Modern society tells us that boundaries are mean. We're told to be inclusive, to share, to accommodate. And mostly that's true. But there are lines. There are lines between kindness and weakness, between neighborliness and submission, between community access and theft. Karen didn't lose because she was a bad driver or a bad realtor. She lost because she mistook my kindness for weakness. She thought that because I was a simple rancher, I didn't understand my worth. She forgot that the people who work the land are the hardest people on earth to move. We are rooted. We are patient. And when we build something, we build it to last. I patted the concrete. "Good job, old girl." I turned back toward the house. The lights were on in the kitchen. I could see Sarah moving past the window. The cattle were bedded down. The wind was soft. I wasn't the sheriff. I wasn't the judge. I was just Jake Riverside. But standing there on my own dirt, behind my own wall, with my family safe and my future secure, I felt like a king.